everyone, and welcome to another page in my 12 journals of 2016. We're getting to the end of the year and I've got some serious catching up to do. This is my November page, and this is the tag that Tim made for November, which is where my adventure on this journal page started. So I think you can see there is a little resemblance in theme at least, and I also used one of the techniques that Tim did, and he used a rub-on technique or a rub-on resist technique, and I am going to use that to make my journal pages. So we're going to end up with a journal page and a tag, and this was the one for the month of July. So you can see this is the format that we're going for. So for those of you new to this series of journal pages, I started out with a page that measures 10¼ inches by 7, and then I'm going to score it in the landscape position at 5 inches, and then I'm going to flip it and score again at 5 inches, which gives me a 1/4 inch gusset in the middle of my journal page. So this is here for two reasons. One, to join it eventually into a book, and for the second reason, that I can use quite chunky embellishments on my page without causing the final journal to be a strange shape once it's finished. So you can see there, that's the little gusset that we've created. So I've collected together some Tim Holtz rub-ons, as well as, I think that one's by Bo Bunny. It's something I've had in my collection for a long time. Just thought it would go with the colours I was thinking of using. And then I sketched out roughly the image that I thought I wanted on my page. So I'm thinking tree, and I just want some branches reaching over my page. I've got a strip down the right hand side where I want my words to go, not dissimilar to the words band that Tim has got on his tag. And I also want to create an area of leaves, falling leaves, lots and lots of falling leaves at the bottom of my page. So the rub-on resist technique is just a way of adding another kind of texture into the background of your journal pages. So the idea is that the rub-on itself resists any ink that you're going to put over the top, and therefore will add another design element into the background of your page. So I've picked this little set of rub-ons because I just felt that the colours went with the colours I was intending to use on the page, and I quite like the little flowery theme in with some of the Tim Holtz rub-ons that I've got in my collection. So I'm bearing in mind the area of sky. That's the area that I'm concentrating on as I add these rub-ons. And for those of you that have not used them before, they are a print that you can transfer onto your page with a lolly stick, and you rub over the top, or a bone folder would do the trick as well. You rub over the top, and that pushes and sticks the transfer onto your page. You can see you can cut into your sheets of rub-ons to make sure that you don't lose any of the surrounding rub-ons, because they pack them in quite well, so you get lots of images on these transfer sheets, and you can cut into them, or don't be afraid to cut into them, and use bits and pieces for this rub-on resist technique. This is about being random and creating little areas of interest in the background of your page. So there we have the layout, or the sprinkling of rub-ons that I've got on my page. The next thing that I'm going to do is to take some Peacock Feathers Distress ink and completely cover my page. This is going to be the main colour of the background of the page. I'm thinking frosty, bright, sunny autumn sky. And this vibrant peacock colour is perfect for that. So I'm just laying down a layer of colour, and you can see immediately how the rub-ons have resisted, particularly the ones with more white in the background of the design. and they resist the ink that we put over the top of them. So I'm just aiming for a little bit of coverage to start with because I'm going to add plenty of texture on top. So I'm going to be using a Tim Holtz stencil to add some more texture into the background. This one is called Gothic. It's a bit of a damask looking pattern, and I started out by thinking I wanted to do a ghosting technique. Now you might or might not realise that distress ink reacts to water, so if I rub over my stencil carefully, because this is quite a detailed one, I'm sort of more patting than rubbing, with a baby wipe. I was hoping to lift the ink, and my baby wipe I don't think was quite wet enough, so I'm trying to add a little bit more water to the mix. You can see the ink lighten, but the fact that I used more water also meant that the water itself leaked underneath the stencil. So this isn't quite as successful as I had hoped, but watch, I still get some texture and I was kind of happy with that. So I'm just blotting it off and I'm going to work with what I've got. I've got little ghost, or in my case a little bit more ghostly impressions appearing as I dry that off. So I'm going to go with that across the page to add that first layer of texture. And I do decide as well to use a little bit of a spray of water to see if that works better, and I have to say similar results. It leaked under the detail of the stencil, so a little bit better, I think, a little bit neater. And then the tapping method, so I'm going to go with the spraying. So you can see I'm just spraying or misting with a little bit of water, combining that with dabbing or removing some of that ink with my baby wipe. I think the spray on its own worked best. I have got some texture in the background and I'm happy with that. So now again I'm going back into the peacock feathers and I'm pushing the ink through the stencil to create more texture on top of the water technique that we've just done, or I've just done. Now you can see, because this stencil is quite detailed, it has a tendency to catch on your ink blending tool. So I'm kind of pouncing and slightly, very delicately twisting to push the ink through the stencil. And you can see that does work, and I have got a subtle, so I've got a subtle area of light pattern and I've got a subtle area of tone on tone. So I'm liking how that looks, and for some reason you didn't actually see me ink the edges. I might have just cut that out by mistake I used gathered twigs around the edge to highlight the edge of the page, and I'm going to use a little bit more of that ink in order to add some obvious texture onto my page. I'm just picking out little sections of the damask pattern, working in that sort of diamond shape. Again, you can see I'm sort of pouncing and slightly twisting that applicator, and now you can really see definite areas of pattern on my background. So the resist has created a definite texture in the background, and then I've got a bit more subtle texture, and then again a little bit more definite texture with this final layer. So now I want to make leaves, and this is one of the first techniques I ever tried care of Tim Holtz, which is adding the ink to your craft mat. So this is a non-stick craft mat that has been well used, as you can see, and I'm adding 3 different colours of distress ink in oranges and red. So I've got squeezed lemonade, I can't remember what the orange was now. I think it was, I'm not sure if it was wild honey, and I've also got some fired brick. So I'm spraying that with a little bit of water, which makes the ink puddle up, and then I'm just dropping that paper and swooshing that paper into the ink to create a mottly background. So this is a fun technique to do because you do definitely get random, and you get the feel for your technique. As your ink is gradually removed from the craft mat, you'll get more dots of ink, and you can use those dots of ink to add more texture. At the moment I'm just going for coverage, as you can see, and then I'm going to do a few sheets of this because I need to cut out lots and lots of leaves. So I'm just using the offcuts from my page and creating my tag, and I'm going to be cutting little leaves out of this. So I'm quite happy if I get, you know, some that are a bit more yellowy than others, some that are a bit more red than others, because that will all add up to creating some lovely leaves. So I'm getting less ink on here now, but I'm still picking up ink to give me texture. And then I can bring back some of those other sheets that I had more colour on to add some dots of ink again to create texture. So for this page I did actually do this twice. I created one lot of leaves and then I didn't have enough, so I had to do this a second time. So just to let you know roughly how much paper I covered. It doesn't have to be pieces like this, you could just do one big piece, but I was just being frugal and using up my scraps. So the next thing I'm going to do, this is where we'll get the, I said the wrong colour. This is mustard seed, not squeezed lemonade as I said earlier. And I'm using that to create some areas where yellow is a bit more predominant. So again, I'm just randomly going over the background that I've created, picking out those slightly lighter areas and emphasising them with a touch more yellow. And I'll do the same for the other colours, so hopefully I'll give you the right colours this time. So the orange is actually spiced marmalade. But you could have used the other colours quite easily. So any of your oranges, reds and yellows would work for this. I mean, if you were going for sort of more maple leaves, you might want to concentrate on a more reddy background. So I'm doing a real, I have no idea, these are kind of oak leaf that I end up using most of, and I'm not sure if I'm being true to the autumn colours that they put on. As you know, all the different trees add different shades of autumn to the landscape. Again, I'm just going over certain areas and picking out and highlighting a bit more orange. And last but not least, I'm using barn door, not fired brick, to add more reddy areas into my paper strips. And you can see how lovely and vibrant these look now. They definitely look like autumn colours. So again, going along with the theme of adding more texture, I'm just picking up some of the barn door ink and I'm keeping my brush wet to keep the ink wet, and then I'm tapping it against, as it happens, a pair of scissors in this instance, and creating some splatter on each of those strips. Lots of different ways to do this. So just picking up the excess and tapping your paper into it works just the same. So this technique is something that is easy for anyone to achieve. It's it's completely random, and that's what you want. And I'm adding a little bit now of splatter or drops, depending on how I choose to put it on my paper, with my gathered twigs. So a little bit of brown going into those vibrant oranges, reds and yellows. That's all the colour added to my paper strips, and I am ready to die cut. I just need to make sure that these are completely dry first, and then I will die cut them, and I'll be back shortly. So to cut out all these leaves, I've got, or I used the Tim Holtz Autumn Gatherings die, and I concentrated my efforts, as you can see from my debris of paper, on the area that had the little oak leaves, although I did end up with some maple leaves as well, because they just would have drifted in from a nearby tree. I also cut some of the leaves out using the Tim Holtz glassine paper, which I did scrumple up first and then flatten out before I cut out my leaves, so that they already had that sort of crunchy texture that you find on the browner leaves that end up on the ground of, in this case, my little tree, underneath my tree on this layout. I used this paper in ages. In fact, I forgot I had it in my collection, but it's a kind of grease-proof feel, or a waxy coated paper. It's got a very strange texture to the touch, and then we're going to add even more texture. I'm going to use it to make my tree by scrumpling it up, and that sort of breaks that waxy area on the top of the paper. So I'm going to scrumple it up, open it up, see what I've got, and then you can see all that lovely texture, and I'm going to go back in and scrunch it again. And that does give you an area of paper now that if you've broken the surface of that wax, you can then add ink. Now, I was going a little bit from memory here, and I couldn't quite remember how we got the texture to be added to the crinkles, if you like. So at this point, I'm adding or darkening the entire piece of paper by adding some more gathered twigs over the top of it. And then I remembered, if you rub the ink pad over the top, it catches the crinkles. So I got there in the end. So I'm using a combination of the two. I wanted the darker colour for my tree, so I'm adding the gathered twigs ink over the entire piece of paper, and then I'm picking up that crinkly texture by rubbing the ink pad over the top. So I'm going to use this paper to create my tree. So I'm going back in and brushing over some of those leaves as well. And I'm roughly sketching back in the trunk of the tree, and you can see that I'm going to be cutting this tree out in sections because the one piece doesn't reach all the way across the page. So sketching out roughly where I wanted the trunk of the tree to be, and my first branch, and then I'm going to go from there. So you can see things are starting to take shape. Because this is all really crinkly, it really doesn't matter if we add on extra roots and we add on extra branches. You won't be able to tell because of the texture we've already created on the glassine paper. So I'm using glue to stick my tree down, and then I'll trim off any excess from the edge of the page. And then it's just a case of adding roots where you want them, and I have to say the roots don't show up very much by the time I've covered the floor of my forest in leaves. And I'm adding more branches. I wanted that top branch to go right across the page, so I'm adding that. You can see, you cannot tell where it has joined onto the other branch, and then I'm going to add a few more little branches onto the bottom or underneath that main branch. So just as a guide, I'm going to line off the area where my word strip will go so that I don't fill in any areas that I don't need to. I've already got the sort of top line drawn in for where I want the leaves to sit on the floor underneath the tree, and now I'm going to randomly add the brown and orange leaves all over the floor of my forest. So as I add the leaves, I am crinkling them up and giving them texture just as they would be if you found them on the floor. They get a little bit wrinkly, and so they're not completely flat on my page. Now I will have to check the area where the page folds to make sure that everything stays in place once we fold this as if it was closed in a book. But I'm just concentrating on covering that entire floor area with leaves. You can see, as well as some the orange and brown leaves that I've showed you, I've also got some yellow and sort of rusty coloured leaves that I've cut out of plain cardstock, and these are colours that came from one of my paper pads that I've got with the Holtz Distress ink colours. So they mix and match in with what I've already got and add another element of interest in the way of colour on my leafy floor. And I'm also adding some of those leaves onto the tree and falling through the air. So here's me just checking that I can close the page and gluing down anything where I need to. So back again, all my leaves are in place, and now I'm going to add my word strip. I cut out my word strip on my Cricut and I've got the word autumn. So I'm just going to trim it now to size and position it on the right hand side of my page. I coloured it in exactly the same way as I did those leaf strips, and I am just deciding where it's going to sit on the edge of the page. So I started out with a word strip that was much wider than what I needed so that I could do exactly this. I've trimmed right close to the bottom of the strip of words or strip of letters that I cut out so that I can add it to the side of my page and then cut away the excess. So making sure it's nice and firmly attached to the edge of the page, and then using my craft knife to remove the excess. Now I did think of doing a double layer of this, but I liked the strip as it was. I was going to do a brown layer on top, but I like the colours and the way that it sits at the edge of the page, because I've got brown on the left hand side and I think the orange works well on the right. Just trying to pick up this little teeny tiny piece that will form, oh, where's it gone? There it is. The centre, or the little piece in the middle of the A. Just removing some excess glue and then moving on to the next stage. Felt I needed a few more leaves falling and a few more leaves attached to the tree, so I'm just adding those in now. I'm just overlapping a couple of those leaves over the word strip on the right hand side. felt that I was almost there, but there was something missing, and I think that was emphasizing the design and doing or adding a little bit of doodling. So I'm sketching around my tree. I'm going to sketch around some of my leaves, and I think you'll agree that it just brings everything to life. So I'm not trying to be the perfect sketch, just drawing wherever I feel things need to be highlighted. And I'm adding a little bit of doodling along the edge of my paper strip to emphasize that area, almost creating like a lacy edge. Adding a little bit of stitching, one of the easiest doodles there is, and again going across the top edge in exactly the same way. And I'm outlining the letters. And I thought I would just pick out one or two leaves, but I end up doing quite a few because I really liked how they looked. So one other thing that I did off camera was to add some glossy accents to the lettering of the word autumn. I did that off camera because I needed it to dry overnight. So you can see here as I tilt the words, they are a little bit glossy on the edge of the page. So now it's time to move on and catch up the tag to how far we've got with the page. So anyone that's been watching this series knows that each of my journal pages has got a tag to go with it. On one side of the tag is a picture of where I started, which was obviously Tim Holtz' November tag, and on the other side there is a memory attached, and it always mimics the layout and look of the page. So you can see that I've done the background in exactly the same way, but I concentrate the details on the edge because obviously most of the tag is covered up with whatever I'm sticking on it, be it Tim's original tag or my memory on the other side. So this is just another of those orange paper strips that I showed you how to create, which forms the top area of the tag. And I've got this picture of my son Callum when he was very little. He's 17 now. And he found this enormous leaf when we were out walking and presented it to camera, as you can see. I wish I'd been able to press it, but it was huge, absolutely huge. And there was no way I had a book big enough to put this leaf into. So the tag itself measures 6 inches by 5¼ inches. Then it's all about adding the doodle details exactly as we did on our page. So we're making our tag match our page. So I'm going along the edges of the photograph of the tag and adding that little bit of white detail. And then finally adding my journaling right around the photograph. This is quite a fun way to add your memory or the journaling about your memory and create a frame for your photograph. So I'm obviously talking about the fact that we love taking autumnal walks, and on this particular day the fact that Callum found this giant leaf. Now I felt that some areas where it was dark I couldn't see the writing so well, so I'm going to be using a combination of the dark and the light. So I'm going over it now with the dark and I'll come back in with the white again, and I get a little bit of a shadow created then, so that areas where the writing goes over the darker areas, it will stand out. Now you can also see that to finish off the tag I've added 4 little leaves, 2 on the front and 2 on the back, which will act as the pull area of the tag once it's sat in the pocket. And I just felt that this page just needed a tiny touch of frost. So I'm going to be using my Distress glitter for this, and the Distress glitter is, it almost looks like sugar, and it just allows you to add a bit of sparkle without adding too much bling, and it's perfect for creating a frosty look. And I've also created the U-shaped strip around the page ready for when we join this together. You'll be able to see more about this in the other videos in this series, but these pages will join together, and that U-shape helps create a little area where we can add those tags. So I've still got a few to catch up, as you can see, 3 more there, plus December is coming up fast. In fact, by the time I post this video, December's tag will be up. So I'm going to do my best to get those pages finished so I can show you how to bind these all together at the end of the year. So this is where I started, Tim's inspiration, and obviously you've been watching my interpretation, and I hope you've enjoyed this page and that it inspires you to give something like this a go. Join in with the tag challenge if you want to, or perhaps create journal pages as I have. I'm not sure what Tim will be doing next year, but I'm sure whatever it is, we'll learn lots and have lots of creative fun along the way. And I've really enjoyed putting this series together. Much as I'm late with it, I am enjoying these pages and looking forward to seeing this book finished, and I hope you are too. Until then, hope you subscribe if you haven't already, and that you like this video, and of course don't forget to share, and I will share a couple of links with you at the end of this video. Thank you for watching. Hi there, me again. First link that I'm going to share with you is the link to all the pages that I've made so far. This is the link to the 12 Journals of 2016 playlist. Now, if you've been making tags, you might want to pop along and have a look at this workshop. This is one of my online workshops where you can make your own tag storage. You can style it to suit your needs. This was my sort of steampunk version, and this is my Christmas version. This is the version I'm going to be finishing this year, believe it or not. I've got all of my tags ready for a countdown to Christmas, and I've made them a bit like an advent, so they've all got the dates on, and on the opposite side, as you can see here, I'm going to be adding photographs and journaling of my run up to Christmas. So this really is a neat idea, and you can get that workshop over at my Etsy shop. Another Christmas workshop you might be interested in is how to make your own Christmas cake. This one's not quite as tasty as a real Christmas cake, but it looks good, and it contains a mini album, so again a perfect way to record your family Christmas, and a great way to perhaps give a crafting gift to a friend. You can send them one of my workshops. And last but not least, if you're struggling to get Christmas cards made, why not look at this festive bundle? You can buy a gorgeous set of Frosty Friends stamps from Rubber Dance, combined with a package of 10 tutorials from me with lots and lots of Christmas card ideas that can get you ready for Christmas. You haven't got long now, so you might be in need of a little bit of help if you haven't already started, and this is the perfect workshop for you.